So what we're going to be doing in this video is we are going to be building a data-driven news application using a tool called Svelte. Now this is going to be a JavaScript-based application. Typically, I will teach something using Python, such as Flask. For the past millions of years, I've taught people how to use Flask in order to build these news apps. But the problem is, using a tool like Flask, using something like Python, you have to host it on a server somewhere. Yes, you can jump through some hoops in order to make sure that it doesn't need a server, make sure you can host it on GitHub Pages or something like that. But it's just another hurdle to get over. Whereas if we use something like Svelte, we are able to build a data-driven news app that just lives in your browser. No one needs to install anything. You don't need a server. It'll just last forever on the internet. You can move it around anywhere. It's nice. It's easy. You can integrate with D3. You can do literally anything you want. And all you have to do is work with Svelte. Now, Svelte is a system that is similar to something like React or Vue, if you're familiar with those, but it's just more fun. It's just nicer. People love it more. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using Svelte. I'm going to encourage you to go through the Svelte tutorial first. So just hit up the tutorial, go through the basics. You're not going to need all of the things that are covered in the tutorial in order to build this news app. In fact, there's a whole lot of stuff that we're not going to use because we're going to be building the most basic of basic apps. But once you want to make the app better, or once you want to understand what's happening whenever I start coding this or that, it's going to be really helpful if you have the basics down, having gone through that tutorial. So if you have not gone through the tutorial, pause this video, go to the svelte.dev website, go through the tutorial. It'll probably take you, spend like a half an hour on it, and you'll be fine. Then you'll come back. All right, so let's start our Svelte app. The way we're going to do this is we're going to start with their default template. Now, we could run this command. I'm just trying to make this as simple as possible, so we're going to do the alternative, where they say download and extract this zip file. So I'm going to click it. It's going to download a zip file for me, and it's called template master. Mine's template master 1 because I already have one time that I've downloaded this. So let me unzip it here. I'm going to rename this news app. Now, what our news app is going to be, we have this template downloaded. We're going to be building a website that is based on this CSV file of schools. So the reason why there's a schools.csv file is just that's what our application is going to be about. It's going to be a list of schools. You can click each one to find out more about the school. So the next steps after this are CDing into the project, then running npm install and npm run dev. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up terminal. I'm going to CD into my news app. I'm really lazy, so I'm just going to click and drag. Probably the laziest way is to just open this up in Visual Studio Code, but it's fine. We'll stick with this. So I'm inside of this folder. I can see all these files here, and I'm going to start by doing npm install. What npm install is going to do is, because this is a JavaScript Node.js template system, because everything here is based on Node, npm install is going to automatically download all of the libraries and everything that we need in order to make this application run. So I'm going to open this up in VS Code. When I run npm install, what happens is package.json is looked at by npm. And they say, what are all of the things that we need to install in order to make this application work? And it goes through here and it says, all right, great. We're going to download all these dependencies, download all these dev dependencies. And now, we ran install. It added 97 packages, and we are now good to go. Next up, npm run dev. When we do npm run dev, we type npm run dev. When I hit enter, npm is going to go in package.json. It's going to look at these scripts and say, okay, dev. So kind of what we're actually running is rollup-c-w, which just kind of starts our application in motion. It turns it into a server on our machine. It compiles all of our HTML, everything that we need to do. So I'm going to run npm run dev. It's going to start rollup. It's going to spit a bunch of stuff out here, and it's going to say your application is ready. Visit it at localhost 5000. So I'm going to copy and paste this. Just a note, add -- host to expose. Right now, I can only view this on my computer. If I wanted to expose this to other computers that were, let's say, on the network, or even on the internet, which I wouldn't really recommend, you could do -- host in order to allow those other machines in order to access it. So, but we're just sticking with npm run dev for now. Now we have a beautiful, wonderful website. The code for this site is inside of the src folder. This is where everything lives that we need in order to make this site. So we have two files inside of here. We have app.svelte and main.svelte. And honestly, all main.js, well, you might kind of understand what props are and things like that if you have watched, if you've gone through the tutorial. Like I said, I really recommend going through the tutorial. We're going to ignore props for right now. We're just going to say, okay, main.js, the only job of main.js is to grab app.svelte and then start it running. It makes a new app, and then we're good to go. So all the code we're really interested in is hiding inside of app.svelte. This is our normal Svelte file. It has the script area. It has the main area, which is our actual the content that shows up on the page. You can see that because it says, hello world, visit the Svelte tutorial to learn how to build Svelte apps. And this says, hello name, visit the Svelte tutorial to learn how to build Svelte apps. So why does it say world there instead of name? Well, if you do the tutorial, you would know that it's pulling in this property, this prop called name from main.js. When they built this template, they said, okay, just send it to always be world. If we changed this to be Soma, because that's me, and I saved, it will actually automatically refresh the page. So a really fun thing about working with Svelte is something called HMR, hot module reloading, hot module replacement. Let's say reloading. And what will happen is when you make an edit to this and you hit save, it'll just automatically be reflected on the page. So no refreshing or anything like that. You can just camp out most of your time in your text editor, and this will just kind of do its magic in the background. So what we are going to want to do is make a list of schools that show up on this page. And then when we click a school, we want it to show up here with, the name of the school, the principal, the contact information, whatever. Now, instead of really focusing on making it look nice or focusing on like cleaning up this code or anything, we're just going to get down to it. We're going to make this a quick and dirty news app. Maybe in a future video, we can make it look nicer, but for now, we're just trying to get the content working. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to want Svelte to read in our data, right? We want it to read in schools.csv. Now, the issue with reading in schools.csv, if we think about the programming language that we're using, even though when you start using a system like this, we're honestly programming more in Svelte than we are in actual JavaScript or Node, CSV file formats don't really come naturally to the JavaScript world. Like, yes, we could download something like Papa Parse or D3 or some library that can read in a CSV for us. But I would like to be a little bit lazier than that. And there is a file format that is actually explicitly for JavaScript, and that is JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's usually very, very easy to read in JSON files into a JavaScript library or JavaScript script or anything like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to convert this file, this schools.js file, into a JSON file. Now, is this really a best practice? Probably not. Probably the best practice is make it so that, let's say I get a new schools.csv file, I could just drop it into here, everything would be fine. But I like how nice it is to import a JSON file. So we're going to convert it to JSON. The tool we're going to use to convert it to JSON is something called Mr. Data Converter. I love Mr. Data Converter. Mr. Data Converter has been around for about 150 years. And all you need to do is paste your data in here, and then it comes out as JSON down below. So I'm going to copy this code from Excel, and I'm going to put it right in there, and bam, as long as I have this selected as JSON properties, it's going to come out as perfect, delightful JSON. Now, you don't have to worry about anyone stealing your data or anything like that if you use Mr. Data Converter. It just stays in your browser. You don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to copy everything that lives in the output here. All I needed to do was click it. It automatically selects it. I just Command C in order to get it selected. And now I'm going to make a new file in SRC, and I'm going to call it schools.json. Gonna paste it right in. Now, good to go. If I want to read a JSON file into this Svelte file here, because in the same way that, there's a name right here, a name variable, and the name variable is reflected down here, we also want there to be a schools variable. Now, if you try to Google how to import a JSON file or how to import a CSV or anything like that into Svelte or whatever, you'll go down terrible, terrible rabbit holes of people saying it should work automatically, it shouldn't work automatically, you need to install this, install that, you need to write it in this format, write it in that format. I've done all that Googling for you. So this right here is the one perfect magic Stack Overflow answer that you need. So I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to say, let's read in schools.json, and just drop in the link right here to the code, just so we know this is where our code came from. Now, you have to make sure that schools.json is inside of SRC. So, I did it by right-click New File, and I pasted it in there. If you already have a JSON file, you can just drop it in here. I'm going to put maybe schools.csv inside of SRC2, just so I have it there. Maybe I want to upgrade later to pulling in CSV files, something like that. So if I read, the issue that you will come across, I'm going to start by just stealing this person's JavaScript, where it says import star as my JSON from test.json. I'm just going to throw that in here. And actually, I think we can just say import schools from schools.json. ./ means it's in the same folder as app.svelte. So if I run this code, it seems like nothing changes here. If I look at my app though, it gives me an error message. The issue that it gives us is error default is not supported by src schools.json. This is the error you are going to come up across if you try to import a JSON file into Svelte without installing and setting up an additional library. So if you ever get this issue, if you ever see, you're trying to import a JSON file, it's giving you an error, run back to the Stack Overflow question, get your answer there. The issue is that what we need is we need to install a plugin for rollup. Rollup is the kind of system that puts together all the Svelte files into one big application. We need to install the plugin JSON, or the plugin JSON plugin, honestly, in the same way that we have a live reload, a Cursor, a Svelte, a CSS only. All of these are other plugins that are installed. We just need to install one new one called plugin JSON. The way we're going to do that is we're going to go back to our terminal, whether it's here, whether it's in VS Code. We're going to Control C to exit out, and we're going to say npm install plugin JSON, save dev, enter, go, 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 done. So quick, so easy. Right now, it's still not going to work. There's one additional thing we need to do. There is a configuration file for rollup, which you can think of rollup as just our server. So there's one extra thing we need to do. Rollup pulls in all these plugins and sets up all these plugins. Once you start getting deeper into Svelte, once you start customizing things, you're going to be customizing this rollup config a decent amount. Whether like things are in browsers or where the CSS goes or blah, 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 things like that. All we need to do here is we need to say, hey, we want to import this JSON plugin. So I'm going to cut and paste that up here. And then we want to use the JSON plugin. Now there are a few different ways that people do this here. I'm actually going to take out compact true. Just because generally speaking, when you see this, when you see other people doing it, inside of plugins, these are all the plugins that get used. This is the Svelte plugin. Here are the options for the Svelte plugin. This is the CSS plugin. These are the options for the CSS plugin. This is the Resolve plugin. These are the options for the Resolve plugin. CommonJS plugin doesn't have any options. Usually this is the way you see the JSON plugin used, so I'm just going to stick with this. Up at the top, I'm going to say JSON parentheses, comma. And that just means, hey, when you're going through these plugins, also add the JSON plugin in. So I'm going to save this config. I didn't get any error messages when I was npm installing this. And so now I'm going to npm run dev. It's going to start my server once again. And as we see, yes, nothing has changed on this page, but there are also no error messages here. Remember when we had all these error messages, default is not exported by srcschools.json. That just meant we have a JSON file. It doesn't want to give up its data. Whereas when we install the plugin just goes in and says, please give me your data, really, and then the JSON file gives it up. So what we want to do now is we now have this schools variable. It is successfully read in. So we want to loop over every single school and display them on the page. So we're going to make it ugly first, and then we're going to make it a little bit better. So I'm going to say each schools as school, and then I'm just going to display the school here. Now, if you are someone who's in one of my classes, you might say, wait, this is not the templating language that we normally use. And I say, yes, there are 1 million templating languages out there, and this is just the way it works for Svelte. So it might look similar to something like, Jinja 2 or Handlebars or Mustache or whatever, but it's yet another one. So it's going to loop through each school, and it's just going to print the schools out. It's going to hit save. It's going to refresh over here and say object, 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 blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's awkward. What we want is maybe a list of different schools. So if we want to make a list, we're going to use, I turned on caps lock, we're going to use UL, which is an unordered list. And we're going to say every school goes on its own list item. Is this still ugly? Yes, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer. So when it's saying object, 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 it's pulling in this JSON, this schools.json. And what we honestly need to do is we need to say, what about this school is it that you want to display? Is it the ATS code? Is it the borough? Is it the borough number? The easiest way to figure out what we want to look at is probably just to open the CSV file again in Excel. So if we look at this, what we probably want is the school name. If the column is school name all caps, when we have read this in from the JSON, when we're in our app, we can just do dot school name. Just because the way the conversion works is just easy peasy, automatically pulls things in. If you did this in, if you had spaces in here, good thing we don't have any spaces, you probably have to do, brackets and quotes, I would think, in order to make it work. But because there's no space in there, we can just do school.school name. So go into the school, go into each row, and then give us the school name. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back, and there we go. Wonderfully enough. Is this ugly? Is this awful? Yes. But at least it's here. So, next up, what we want to do is have the ability for when we click, we want one specific school to show up on the page. This is probably the most common thing you're going to end up doing when you are working with, actually, let me see, does this really get cut off there like that in the Excel? Yes, it does. How delightful, how delightful. Well, what are you gonna do? Okay, so what we want to do is we want to click this, and then maybe we want, like, instead of this saying goodbye Soma, maybe it should say the school name, right? Maybe we can just start from there and then start shifting later on. So as we click different schools, we want this to change up top. Now, I'm actually going to delete this and make like an empty H1 here. I'll just say school is blank. And we want to fill in the school's name there. So first I'm going to do this in a bad way, and then I'm going to do this in a slightly better way. So what we want to have happen is when we click this school, we want this to show up. So I am going to, I could add a link in here. I could add a href. The issue with that is Svelte is going to yell at me about accessibility, and it's going to give me a bunch of squiggly lines under here. And I don't want you to have to look at that. So, just like you have to look at these squiggly lines here, we'll delete that because we're not using name anymore. I don't want you to have to look at the squiggly lines, because if I do a href link to nothing, it's just going to say, no, really, where are you linking to? And I'm like, I'm not actually linking to anything. So when you do this yourself, you should probably use an A just so it looks like a link, but I'm just going to use the li. So when I click this school, so on a click, what do I want to have happen? What I want to have happen is, let's see, I want this to get filled in with, let's say, a school name. So I'm going to make a new variable called school name, not set it to be anything. It's just going to show up there. So school is undefined. Great, delightful. We'll stick with that. When we click, I want to say, hey, take the school name variable and set it to be equal to the name of the school. Let me stretch this out a little bit. So I'm going to say, hey, when you click this, this means, run the thing to the right of this. It's like it's an inline function. It's like a Python lambda. Take school name and update it to be the same as whatever the display school name is. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to be here. I'm going to click this. Hey, it works perfectly. It works perfectly. How delightful. Now, do we want more information than just the school's name? Probably, right? What other kind of info do we have here? We have the state that it's in, these are in New York City. We have the principal's name. We have a zip code. We have all this other stuff. We have the location code, ATS code. the school type, we probably want to display those there. And you say, wait, are we going to do that for every single one of these? So I could say, for example, the education level is edu level. I could add another variable called edu level, and then I have to update the school type here to be, elementary, K-8, whatever, and do that for every single one of these columns that I'm interested in, like school or edu level. No, like I don't want to do that. That's awful. That's awful. We're gonna have to change what we're doing here. Delete, delete. What we want to do is we want to have a single variable called selected school. Let selected school. School is really one of those words where once you start typing a lot, you're just like, is that really how you spell it? And so what we want to do is we want to be able to say, let's look at that school's school name. Let's look at that school's, what was it? SCH type. And this is what we want to do instead. We want to say, hey, when someone clicks this school, here's the school that we want to look at. Just save it into the selected school variable, basically making a copy of this. So then I can say, take the school we're looking at, let's see the school name. Take the school we're looking at, let's see the school type. Let's see the school we're looking at, and let's get the, the principal's name, Now, if I try to look at this, everything is gone. Everything has disappeared. What happened? What went wrong? If we look at terminal, oh, you know what? Maybe we just need to look at the console here. Yeah, so it's going to yell at us. Cannot read property school name of undefined. So when you're debugging Svelte apps, sometimes your issues will show up over here inside of your terminal. Sometimes the issues will show up in the actual app, kind of depending upon what kind of errors there. If it's setting up the app, it's going to show up over here. If it's executing the app, it's going to show up over here. So when things stop working, you want to make sure you check in terminal. You want to make sure you also check in your browser. The way I opened that up, again, was View, Developer, JavaScript console. I just used the shortcut key instead. So cannot read property school name of undefined, app.svelte, line number 12. We're like, no, wait, but every school has a school name. Every school has a school type. Every school has a principal. You say, wait, what happens before I've selected a school? When we first say, hey, we're going to select a school, when I first visit this page, there is no school that is selected. There's no school that's selected. So what I need to do is I need to say, hey, we only want to do this if there actually is a selected school. So I'm going to say, if selected school, then you can do this. And now, looks great, looks great. When I click one of these schools, bam, it now shows the school up there. If I click this school here, it now shows that school up there, shows the education level, shows the principal. This one shows the school, education level, principal. Now, an issue is I don't want to see this big long list down here, right? Like I've selected a school, I want to be on a page just about that school. So what I'm going to say is, I'm going to say, hey, if there's a selected school, show the information about the school. If there's not a selected school, then display that list. Oh, let me add that UL back. So now I have a list of schools. Maybe I should make it say select a school, maybe NYC school list. Select a school to read some details about it. I say, oh, great, I'd love to select a school, right? I select this school, gives me some information about the school. Now what do I do? Oh, awful, awful. I need like a back button, right? I need a back button. You might say, oh, just refresh the page. And I would say that's a pretty bad user experience. What we're going to do instead of forcing people to refresh every time they click a page is maybe have a little button that says go back. So I'm going to throw that up at the top. I'm going to say go back to school list. So when I click it, we now have something that says go back to school list. It doesn't work, but we're going to make it work. Now, you will see this list, or you will see the school if there is a selected school. If there's not a selected school, then you'll see the school list. So what we need to do is, if someone clicks go back to school list, I'll actually make it a link this time. When you click this, what's going to happen is you're going to run a function that takes selected school and sets it equal to null, which is just like nothing. And so now when I click a school, there's now a link up here. If I click this link, bam, it says, hey, get rid of selected school, set it equal to nothing. And when there's no selected school, it's going to show us this here. So now we have the issue here. It says, oh, the A element should have an href attribute. And I'll say, okay. I want to link to, I don't know, to nothing. And it's going to yell at you and it's going to say, it's not valid. It's not valid. And I say, okay, well, actually, what's quick fix? Oh, look, I can disable accessibility. Great. Probably shouldn't disable accessibility there, but I think it's just because of the href thing. So what should we do in that situation? I actually don't know the answer, but we'll leave it like that. So now we have the school list. If we click one of these schools, it shows us a page all about the school. Then we can go back to the schools list. So for all of this, as long as we have, you know what, this is actually bad because it's adding the little pound symbol hashtag right up there. So I'm going to move on click to actually be the p tag here. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, it's going to be better. So honestly, what you should probably do is set something up with a link and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot more that needs to go on there. But for now, you know, ignoring everything about making this page presentable and look nice, we've made our news app, right? We have our list of things here. We click one of them. We click back. What could be better than this? And you say, how about sorting? How about filtering? And I say, oh, it's actually pretty reasonable. It's pretty reasonable. So let's actually add, we're going to add an inbox, not an inbox, an input box up here. And as we type in the input box, it is going to filter this list down here. Honestly, I think we're pretty good here. Let's end this video. We'll have a second video where we do filtering, sorting, and actually making all of these links look a little bit nicer to make it be a full-fledged web application instead of something that is terrible and ugly. If you want to hop on improvements before we get to that point, what I'd recommend doing is changing the style down here. And I'm honestly dying here looking at all of these p tags that are actual links. So I'm just going to change all of these really. Quick fix, sure. Then I'm going to do the same thing down here. Is I'm going to say, please don't yell at me about what I'm doing right now, which is what this line does. And then I'm going to say, add an A tag here and add the click. What happens if I don't add an href? Let's find out. Save, back. Oh, yeah, the problem with not adding an href is you don't get the clicky button bit. We can actually change that manually, but we'll leave it like this for now. Good enough, good enough. So this is our web app. It's awful. I'm gonna untext align center this just so it looks a little bit more decent. There we go. All right, we're geniuses. So look out for the next video.